Welcome to Latest News Blaster. If you want daily real celebrity news, subscribe now. For nearly 3 decades, Rob Reiner appeared to be one of Hollywood's most predictable figures. A celebrated filmmaker, outspoken political voice, devoted family man, and reliable presence in American pop culture, Reiner seemed transparent, almost boring by celebrity standards. But behind that familiar public image, a very different story was quietly unfolding. Now, after 27 years, insiders, critics, and longtime observers are re-examining what many are calling Rob Reiner's double life. Not a criminal secret, but a carefully managed split between who he presented to the world and who he was privately navigating fame, power, relationships, and influence. So why now? And why does it suddenly matter? The public, Rob Reiner, everyone thought they knew. Rob Reiner's public identity was carefully built over decades. From his early fame on All in the Family to directing iconic films like The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me, and A Few Good Men, Reiner became synonymous with emotional storytelling and moral clarity. In public appearances, he was vocal about political and social issues, consistent in his ideological position, open about his beliefs and values, seen as principled and transparent. To fans, this openness created trust. Reiner didn't just make movies, he stood for something. That perception lasted for decades, but critics now argue that while Reiner was loud about his beliefs, he was remarkably quiet about parts of his own life, the private reality few people questioned. For 27 years, Reiner managed his personal life with near surgical precision. He rarely allowed cameras behind closed doors. Family tensions, internal conflicts, and professional contradictions were kept out of headlines. Hollywood insiders say this wasn't accidental. Reiner understood the power of narrative, perhaps better than most. As a director, he knew how stories shape perception. As a public figure, he applied that same discipline to his own image. What emerged was a divide: outspoken, morally certain, confident, guarded, strategic, selectively silent. This isn't unusual in Hollywood, but the length and consistency of the divide is what raised eyebrows. Why the double life label is sticking. The phrase double life doesn't imply crimes or scandals. Instead, it reflects a long-term pattern of selective transparency. Observers point to several factors: long-standing family disputes that stayed private, shifts in personal alliances never explained publicly, professional decisions that conflicted with stated values, a noticeable reluctance to address controversies involving close circles. For 27 years, these inconsistencies were either ignored or excused as personal matters. But as public trust in celebrity authenticity declines, audiences are looking back with sharper eyes. The timing, why this is surfacing now. The renewed attention isn't random. Several cultural shifts have converged. Hollywood's accountability era. Fans now expect transparency. Reevaluation of legacy figures. No one is exempt from scrutiny. Social media amplification. Old interviews resurface quickly. Generational change. Younger audiences question authority. Suddenly, long-ignored questions feel relevant again. Why did Reiner speak loudly about some truths while avoiding others? Why did certain narratives remain untouched for decades? And why did no one press him harder until now? Family, silence, and controlled narrative. One of the most discussed elements of Reiner's private life has been his family dynamics. While he often referenced family values in public, he remained notably silent during periods of reported internal conflict. That silence was strategic. By saying nothing, Reiner avoided tabloid wars, public statements, or emotional explanations. But silence can also be a narrative choice. Critics argue that for someone so outspoken about accountability and honesty, the lack of openness at home created an imbalance that feels increasingly uncomfortable to audiences. Hollywood power and image protection. Reiner's influence wasn't just creative, it was institutional. For years, he operated within powerful Hollywood circles, where reputation management was an art form. PR teams, selective interviews, and aligned media outlets helped reinforce a consistent image. This wasn't deception in a legal sense, but it was curation. The result? A version of Rob Reiner that felt complete, while important chapters remained unwritten. Supporters push back. Not everyone agrees with the criticism. Supporters argue, privacy is not dishonesty. Public advocacy doesn't require personal disclosure. Family matters should remain private. Longevity in Hollywood requires boundaries. They see the double life framing as unfair, a modern obsession with overexposure applied retroactively to a man who simply valued control. Why audiences feel different today? The difference isn't Reiner, it's the era. Today's audiences are skeptical of polished narratives. They value vulnerability over perfection and transparency over authority. In that context, Reiner's decades-long image control feels outdated. What once looked like professionalism now looks like avoidance to some viewers. Legacy at a crossroads. Rob Reiner's film legacy remains intact. His contributions to cinema are unquestioned. But legacy isn't just about work anymore. It's about authenticity. The question now isn't whether Reiner did something wrong. It's whether the gap between his public voice and private silence reshapes how audiences remember him. So was it really 27 years of lies? That depends on perspective. There were no fabricated biographies, no invented accomplishments, no criminal secrets, but there was a carefully maintained separation between public truth and private reality. And in today's culture, that separation feels like a lie to some and a right to privacy to others. Final thoughts. Rob Reiner didn't suddenly change. What changed was the world watching him. After 27 years, audiences are no longer satisfied with curated personas. They want the whole story, or at least honesty about what's missing. Whether this moment redefines Rob Reiner's image or simply adds complexity to it remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. The story people thought they knew was never the full one. What often gets overlooked in conversations about Rob Reiner's so-called double life is the emotional cost of sustaining it for nearly 3 decades. Maintaining a carefully separated public and private identity isn't just a strategic choice, it's a long-term psychological burden. Those close to legacy Hollywood figures often describe a quiet exhaustion that comes from always being on message. For Reiner, that message was consistency. He rarely contradicted himself publicly, rarely revised past statements, and almost never addressed speculation directly. While that discipline helped preserve his reputation, it also created distance between him and the audience, and possibly even between him and those closest to him. In today's environment, silence itself has become suspicious. Where previous generations viewed discretion as class, modern audiences often interpret it as concealment. This shift explains why actions that went unquestioned for 27 years are now being reframed and debated. Reiner's silence speaks louder than words. Notably, Rob Reiner has not aggressively pushed back against the double life narrative. He hasn't issued emotional denials or lengthy explanations. Instead, he has continued doing what he has always done, saying nothing. That silence leaves room for interpretation, and in the digital age, interpretation spreads faster than facts. Clips, quotes, and old interviews are being reanalyzed through a modern lens, often stripped of their original context. A complicated, not canceled legacy. Ultimately, this moment doesn't erase Rob Reiner's achievements. It complicates them. It reminds audiences that public figures are rarely as simple as their reputations suggest. The real revelation after 27 years isn't scandal, it's complexity. And for many, that truth is far more unsettling than any headline ever could be. For decades, Rob Reiner embodied the ideal of a Hollywood success story, a talented artist, vocal political advocate, and devoted family man. But the more critics, insiders, and audiences dig into his private life, the more they uncover nuances that complicate this seemingly simple portrait. This extended examination doesn't aim to sensationalize, but to analyze the dynamics of fame, privacy, and perception, and why they matter in the case of Reiner. The anatomy of a carefully curated life. Hollywood thrives on narratives. Celebrities are not just artists, they are brands, carefully packaged and managed. Few understood this better than Reiner. As a director, he had mastered the art of storytelling, creating films that left lasting cultural imprints. But beyond his professional work, he also applied these same principles to his personal life. Sources close to Reiner describe him as disciplined and deliberate. Every interview, every public appearance, and even casual remarks were measured. He rarely allowed unscripted moments to slip through. The result was a persona that was consistent, reliable, and reassuring to fans. People knew what to expect. Rob Reiner would stand up for what he believed, advocate for justice, and embody moral clarity. Yet, behind this polished surface, a different set of rules applied. Family disputes, professional disagreements, and personal struggles were carefully contained. Unlike the movies he directed, where every scene contributes to a narrative, his personal life contained chapters that the public never saw. Family ties, the silent struggle. One of the most intriguing aspects of Reiner's double life revolves around family. Known for frequently emphasizing family values, Reiner maintained a public posture of cohesion and stability. But those closest to him have indicated that his private reality was far more complex. Conflicts, disagreements, and moments of tension existed, but were kept strictly private. This decision was both strategic and protective. By keeping disputes out of the press, Reiner shielded his family from tabloid scrutiny, public speculation, and the kind of media attention that can magnify personal struggles into national scandals. But there's also a cultural dimension. Hollywood has historically rewarded public figures who manage to project unity and consistency. In this sense, Reiner's discretion was aligned with industry norms. Still, critics argue that such silence, when coupled with vocal advocacy in other areas, creates a perception gap. Audiences are left to reconcile a public figure who preaches transparency and accountability with a private life marked by discretion and selective omission. For some, this feels like a contradiction. For others, it is simply prudence. Navigating Hollywood power. Reiner's life cannot be fully understood without recognizing his position within Hollywood's ecosystem. Beyond his films and political advocacy,